Open-world games continue to be one of the most popular genres in gaming, but not every game is created equal. Some tend to amaze us with their designs, while others end up being boring trudges through poorly designed virtual landscapes. Today we'll be discussing the latter as we run down 15 of the most boring open-world games of all time. Metal Gear Survive. Metal Gear Solid 5 took the fan-beloved series to new heights with its shift to an open-world structure, but the road to release was anything but smooth. The turbulent development led to the infamous Kojima-Konami breakup, putting a big question mark on the future of the franchise. Konami tried to take the game's foundations and create another makeshift zombie open world out of it with Metal Gear Survive, but it was a spectacular failure. A barren open world, repetitive missions, and uninteresting progression mechanics were some of the biggest issues that plagued Survive's gameplay loop, making it a really boring time. Biomutant. At first glance, Biomutant looked like an interesting game with its post-apocalyptic world and combat mechanics. But when the game actually released, Biomutant felt like a faint shadow of those glorious promises. Some parts of the experience are genuinely great, including but not limited to the combat, but the open world surrounding those pillars leaves a lot to be desired, making it a disappointing game on the whole. Rise of the Ronin. Team Ninja of Neo fame tried to create an interesting open world experience with Rise of the Ronin, and while the concept and setting looked really compelling at first glance, the end product was anything but. Rise of the Ronin ended up being a very mediocre open world that was characterized by frustrating progression systems and side activities that felt very derivative. It has some good things going for it, but looking at the grand picture, Rise of the Ronin is an underwhelming experience. Crackdown 3. Microsoft made some pretty lofty promises with Crackdown 3, and it's safe to say that it delivered on little, if none, of those with the final release. Crackdown 3 was a really boring game on all fronts. Be it the open world that was devoid of any interesting activities to pursue, the repetitive objectives in its missions, or even the sloppy moment-to-moment gameplay that sits at the core of it all. Crackdown 3 was a major disappointment by all means, and it's a game that you should try to stay away from at all costs. Mafia 3. The Mafia games have always excelled at telling engaging stories and creating visually stunning worlds, but the developer tried to create something bigger with Mafia 3, which came out in 2016. The new mission structure revolved around taking on the same kinds of activities over and over and over again, making it a really boring experience. Add to that some easy-to-exploit AI, and Mafia 3 can become pretty hard to enjoy with those annoyances. Spider-Man 3.
Help! Please! Someone! I'm going to die!
Insomniac has been doing a great job with Marvel Spider-Man releases, but the friendly neighborhood webhead has had no shortage of disappointing releases in the past. One such game has to be Spider-Man 3, which was released in 2007 and was largely based on Sam Raimi's movie by the same name. But it was a lackluster experience that heavily relied on quick-time events and flashy set pieces instead of providing mechanically rich and open-world experience that would make fans feel like the superhero. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Assassin's Creed Valhalla takes what worked in prior games and creates a vast web of ideas and mechanics with a scale so large that it ends up biting itself back in the foot. Valhalla has no shortage of content, and the open world is quite vast in terms of the square footing, but the game's consistent focus on quantity rather than quality makes it a bland experience. As a result, the opportunities for parkour are limited, making Valhalla's open world component quite boring when compared to other entries in the franchise. Mass Effect Andromeda. Mass Effect is one of the most beloved RPGs of the last couple of generations, and Andromeda tried to take those concepts and morph the franchise into an open-world format. The initiative was pretty novel and brimming with potential, but there were plenty of issues that scarred its development, and the final result had nothing that made prior games such a fun time. Andromeda was a middling open world at best, and it failed at that due to a multitude of technical inefficiencies. Generation Zero. Generation Zero thrusts players into an alternate 1980s setting where robots are imposing a brutal threat upon mankind's existence, but the game squanders that potential, resulting in an underwhelming experience through and through. Some aspect of its gameplay, such as the shooting, can be satisfying on some level, but the open world mechanics and progression systems are pretty boring, which makes the game an absolute trudge in the long run. Vendetta: Curse of Raven's Cry. Developed by Reality Pump Studios, Vendetta: Curse of Raven's Cry describes itself as a pirate adventure like no other, but that's really not the case. It's a barely functioning open-world game that's plagued with unresponsive controls, uninteresting combat, and a story that fails to keep you occupied in the long run. It's a horrible experience that should be avoided at all costs, though it could have been somewhat better if it had spent some more time in the oven. Skull and Bones. The developer tried to capitalize on the ideas found in Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag with Skull and Bones, but it's safe to say that those efforts didn't amount to much considering the state of the final release. Skull and Bones is characterized by the boredom that is largely a byproduct of its bland open world and microtransaction-laden progression system, rounding out this profit-driven by the numbers live service game. Redfall. Arcane Studios' Redfall is easily one of the biggest disappointments of recent memory, and that's honestly a shame because it genuinely had some potential with its ability-based gameplay and open-world mechanics meshed with the co-op nature.
Next time.
But the final product felt like a hodgepodge of half-baked mechanics, and that coupled with the litany of bugs and glitches makes trudging through Redfall's challenges an experience that's just as boring as it is frustrating. Days Gone. Days Gone is best described as a game of two halves. The bike mechanics and the freaker hordes provide a great deal of fun, while the surrounding open world leaves quite a bit to be desired. And that feeling can largely be chalked up to different elements ranging from poor balancing to uninteresting side activities, which can make large stretches of the game a really boring experience. Anthem. BioWare is one of the most prestigious developers in the market, and Anthem had some pretty big shoes to fill with its brand of open-world action. After enduring a turbulent development cycle that was infested with publisher interference, Anthem's final version ended up being a faint shadow of the glorious promises that were made. A weak endgame, bland story, and microtransactions were just some of the problems that were evident with Anthem's 1.0 release. The developer planned to right those wrongs with Anthem next, but even those promises turned into sawdust as the publisher withdrew post-launch support for the game. Agents of Mayhem. Volition's spin-off of the Saint Rose franchise takes what worked in prior games and tries to craft a unique experience with the same framework. It had some potential with the ability-based combat and fun traversal, but boring mission design and inconsistent performance make the moment-to-moment gameplay a rather sloppy experience. Hey, did you know that we at GamingBolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.